Hey guys, Billy here. Hope everybody's doing well. Coming at you today with a video, actually a video response. My buddy Brett over at Vinyl Victim had put up a video a few days ago that I thought was really interesting. The stories that he told with it were took me back. Very descriptive, and I just really enjoyed it, and it kind of got the creative juices flowing in me as well to maybe throw my hat in the ring and make a video response. Anyway, the video that Brett did over at Vinyl Victim was I think it was like top 10 essential 80s albums. He did go through and kind of preference it with, it had to be a great album. It had to, from front to back. Couldn't just have like one good song on it. And he pretty much limited his list to only pop albums of the 80s. To me, the 80s were so much more than just pop. Granted, pop was really huge in the 80s. I mean, that's when it became, to me, that really is what screams the 80s, is pop. Things like Cyndi Lauper and Madonna, and Rubik's Cube, and just things like that. The Atari, even the Nintendo. Gosh, so many things. Handheld gaming systems. The game you used to. You put up like it was like a pair of binoculars. You put it up. I can't even remember what it was, but you put it up and you would play looking through the binoculars, and so much crazy shit in the 80s. But we had all the cool stuff, man. The raddest bikes, you name it, man. Roller rinks, shopping malls, and that's what Brett had touched on that really got me thinking. Man, shopping malls in the 80s were the shit, man. I mean, you could go... the shopping malls are dead now. Even the biggest, most badass shopping malls are nothing compared to what shopping malls were. And I'm talking just every shopping mall in any decent-sized town throughout the country in the 80s. These shopping malls were killer, man. They were badass. They had everything. Like Brett was saying, you could go in and... there would be 2 bookstores, a Spencer's, 2 or 3 music stores, Hallmark, a food court, and he mentioned Sbarro too. Sbarro pizza was the bomb. But the food court with anything you wanted, Chinese, hot dogs, steak and cheese sandwiches, Sbarro pizza. The food court was just amazing. And then you'd go down at the other end, and there would be the arcade, and that's usually the first place you hit when you came into the mall. So like you said, man, on Saturdays you could go in there, you'd hit the arcade, spend all your week's money in the arcade, hang out there, go hit the food court, grab you something to eat, grab you some pizza or a steak and cheese or a Burger King or whatever you wanted to get. Check out the music stores. Don't forget KB Toys and Hobby. Man, the toy stores in the malls were killer, There was just so much great stuff to do in the mall. And then, like I said, some malls were bigger than others. Like one mall here had a racetrack built into it, like a go-kart track. We had movie theaters, just the coolest thing, and that made, when Brett told that story, it really took me back to that time and made me think about those much simpler times, when we could actually ride your bike to wherever you wanted to go, walk to your buddy's house. Nowadays people are just I don't know, it's probably a little bit of 2 things. We're probably a little bit too overprotective of our kids and our space. But, we have to be, because there's fucking idiots out there everywhere, which it just did. I'm assuming there were probably always idiots around, but they just didn't get the attention that they seem to get these days. The world just seemed like a much safer place back then. Kind of wish we could go back a little bit. I mean, I do like some of the things that we have, you know, the internet and YouTube, and being able to communicate like this and get whatever we want at the touch of a button. However, I do long for simpler times. So with that being said, I actually wanted to put a response video together of my quote-unquote essential albums of the 80s. Not necessarily essential, but things that really scream the 80s to me. Things that take me back to the 80s. And as you can see, some of these albums here behind me, you know, these are kind of the honorable mentions, I guess you could say. You know, George Michael, Faith, Huey Lewis and the New Sports. That would have definitely been in my list had Brett not went on and on and on and on. And plus, I talk about that album all the time. What a killer album. Just loaded front to back. Hit after hit after hit after hit. Michael Jackson, Thriller. I know this pisses people off when we say this in the VC, but you know what needs to be said about that. But really, what needs to be said about Michael Jackson, Thriller? I mean, just one of the most influential artists and albums of all time. Born in the USA, Bruce Springsteen. Eazy-E does it. I talk about Eazy-E so much, I figured there was no sense in talking about Eazy-E anymore, especially in this this video. But you know, that I kind of throw that in there because 80s to me weren't just about pop, or weren't just about hair metal or hair rock, you know, glam rock, which there was plenty of that. I was first kind of introduced to hip hop and rap in the 80s too, so that's really kind of deeply ingrained in there, and Eazy-E is one of the main reasons for that. Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms, and what 80s list would be complete for me without some little Sammy Hagar and a knock at Andy. Sammy Hagar, Standing Hampton. What an awesome album. So, like I said, I have some of these albums over here behind me that just kind of scream the 80s. They're kind of the honorable mentions, so to speak. But jumping right in here, I kind of put these in a little bit in order, but they may jump around a little bit. But so just so you know, I'll talk about these. This is kind of just the growing up stage for me. So Prince, 1999. When I first heard this on the radio, you know, you've got Little Red Corvette. I was going to a high school football game with my dad and my uncle, and we were in his old truck, and Little Red Corvette came on the radio, and I was like, that was the first time I heard it. I'm like, wow, this is crazy, this is sick. I mean, I was probably 8 or 9 years old when I first heard it, and I was just blown away. Had to have it. So then you hear 1999, Delirious, just a great record, a great artist. Another one that I'm not going to mention because Brett and anybody else who does one of these lists, if they do a response video, will certainly mention Purple Rain. Then we have Def Leppard, Pyromania. Most of these are my original copies, or copies that I've had for some time. So this one here does have a cutout. It's still in great shape, but the delete notch there. You know, this one here, the first time I heard this, I was probably at a buddy's house. There were some older kids. We were playing wiffle ball, and there were some older kids, probably 5, 6, 7 years older than us. But my buddy lived in, I guess looking back on it now, you could say it was the projects. It was a housing project, but we were in a fairly decent neighborhood. But it was the other side of town. But you know, he was still my best friend in life, and he lived in the housing project. So we would play wiffle ball out in the streets of at the housing project, and so all the kids would kind of meet there. And that was the first time I heard this record. It was actually a cassette back then. They had the boom box out there, called it the Ghetto Blaster, but had the Ghetto Blaster or the boom box when we were playing wiffle ball. And I'm trying trying to think what the first song was. Probably Rock of Ages or Foolin'. Rock of Ages or Foolin' was probably one of the first songs I heard from Def Leppard, and it was it was great. I mean, this album was produced by Mutt Lange, who has such a great quality to his production. I mean, you can definitely tell his stuff. It stands out different than anybody else's. But you know, this album has Photograph, Foolin', Rock of Ages, so much great stuff on here. But this one just takes me back to, like I said, those times in the housing project with all my friends playing wiffle ball. It was either wiffle ball or tennis ball. I'm pretty sure it was wiffle ball. Same game, different ball. Then this next album, first time I was introduced to these guys was I was spending the night with a friend's house, and we were watching Saturday night videos. So this would have been probably 1983, I think. Yeah, 1983. So I would have been like 8 years old. 9 years old, and it was like our radio station in town was KHTR, and KHTR sponsored this hour-long show on Saturday night at 10 o'clock, and it was I think it was called like Hot Hit Videos or something like that. And one of the DJs would get on, and he would do his little spiel, and they would play the video. And you know, of course, then I was into watching videos of, like, you know, Men Without Hats, Safety Dance, and Def Leppard, you know, different things like that. But the first time I saw Motley Crue, they came. There you go. Now you can see that Motley Crue. This is Shout at the Devil. The first time I saw the Motley Crue video for Looks That Kill, it was on Saturday Night Video, and I was blown away. It was, I mean, imagine being a 9-year-old boy seeing this, and not just a 9-year-old boy, a 9-year-old boy who was freaking ate up with Kiss, seeing that come on the TV screen, and I hadn't seen anything like that since Kiss, so I was blown away. I was hooked immediately. I never will forget the first time I heard this Motley Crue record, and love it to this day. Motley Crue, you know, they were a staple of the 80s, you know, with Girls, 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 Theater of Pain, you know, Home Sweet Home, and then of course Dr. Feelgood in the late 80s. It was just, those guys were, they could do no wrong. Then I think, I'm not sure, this is still probably in the Saturday night videos time of my life, 83, because we didn't get cable in my town until 1984, so there was no MTV for me yet, but so Saturday Night Videos is probably where I was first introduced to John Cougar Mellencamp. I'm not sure if Crumbling Down or Pink Houses was the first single off there. I can't remember. I've usually got a pretty good memory, but I think it was probably Crumbling Down. But I remember him doing, you know, he was in this outfit with these shoes, straight out of the 50s look, doing these James Brown, Michael Jackson type, you know, white boy moves. But you know, he was doing it, and I was pretty blown away. I loved it. Everybody loved John Cougar in the 80s. I mean, I guess I can't say everybody, but everybody around me loved John Cougar. But this one here, Crumbling Down, Pink Houses, Authority Song, those were the big ones released off of this album. Just a great record, a great artist. He has so many great albums I could have chosen. You know, Scarecrow. Just you name it. Any of his 80s albums were really, really good. Still on the Saturday Night Video thing would be ZZ Top. This is Eliminator with Give Me All Your Lovin', Got Me Under Pressure, Sharp Dressed Man, I Got the Six Legs, the TV Dinners. this they probably made a damn video for almost every song on this album, but you know, everybody remembers you know, Sharp Dressed Man and Legs, with all the hot chicks in them. So this was my kind of, it wasn't really my introduction to ZZ Top, but definitely the big time splash that they made here in the Midwest, at least for me, on an impressionable 9-year-old boy. Still in 1983, this one was all those there that I just showed kind of affected me. You know, they caught my attention or caught my eye or my ear, but nothing quite like this. Quiet Riot. So y'all know Mental Health, but I think it was Come On Feel the Noise. It was either Come On Feel the Noise or Mental Health. I think it was Come On Feel the Noise was the first single, and this was probably Solid Gold. I saw these guys on Solid Gold singing this in probably 1983, and I was ate up. Kevin DuBro's vocals, his antics on stage, plus just the, you know, Carlos Cavazo, Rudy Sarzo, Frankie Banali on drums. But this really just freaking blew my mind. Kind of the same way Iron Maiden's Eddie, you know, or Vic Rattlehead from Megadeth. I mean, but this was so cool to me. So Quiet Riot, Mental Health. I was just ate up with that after hearing it. I mean, I had to have posters, T-shirts. I would, as silly as it sounds, I would dress like Carlos Cavazo with the black and white striped shirt. Just ate up with those guys, and just it was sick. It was funny. Then 1984 comes along, and we get cable in my little town, and Van Halen's Jump and Hot for Teacher and Panama. I mean, you name it. You know, one right after the other. So Van Halen, 1984. You know, Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing for a guy like me who plays guitar. I knew right then and there that it was like kind of watching Picasso paint a masterpiece. It's like, yeah, I could probably try that, but I could never do it like that, so I'm not even going to attempt. I guess I could have tried, but no, I knew I was never going to be that good. So Van Halen's 1984, just so many great songs on there. Excuse me. And then Twisted Sister, Stay Hungry. When I first saw, you know, I think with me, a big part of the 80s was music videos. Yes, I certainly listened to a lot of radio, and I certainly listened to a lot of cassettes and albums, but music videos is where I got a lot of exposure to new artists, and Dee Snider and Twisted Sister was one of those that the shock rock sort of thing. It grabbed a hold of me and never let go. And songs like Stay Hungry, We're Not Gonna Take It, I Wanna Rock, The Price. Great album. Killer band. Love these guys. Then I've talked about this before. That would have been 84. Then around 85, I started I had a paper route, and we would strap the boombox to the front of the handlebars, and we had our cassettes, and this was one of those cassettes. These next two actually were ones that we just wore out on the paper route. I mean, probably these two records from 85, 86, these were probably the two most played records in that time for me, especially on this paper route. But Run DMC, Raising Hell. You got Peter Piper, It's Tricky, My Adidas, Walk This Way. Speaking of videos, the Walk This Way video, with Aerosmith, Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, and Run DMC was such a great video and an MTV staple. But You Be Illin', Raising Hell, just a great record. This was probably not my. It probably wasn't my earliest exposure to rap or hip hop music, but it was definitely the most mainstream for me. Then moving right along in the same vein, but three white boys out here just kicking out some sick shit. The Beastie Boys, License to Ill, 1986. I'll show the gate. Very cool. MCA, Adam Yauch, Mike D, King Ed Rock, just crazy guys. But just, of course, it doesn't have the song listing on it, so I'm going by memory. Paul Revere, Brass Monkey, Fight for Your Right to Party. Man, I can't even think of the other songs off the top of my head, but just a killer album, front to back. I listen to this thing over and over and over again. And that was one that I think I dug more without the music videos. Of course, they had the music video for You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party, but I didn't particularly care for it. I just loved the music. Produced by Rick Rubin. It's just a masterpiece of a record. Then we're probably getting into my middle school days here. Yeah, later in '86. You can't talk about the 80s without talking about Poison. Look What the Cat Dragged In. Of course, I Want Action. I Won't Forget You, Baby. I Won't Forget You. Talk Dirty to Me. Just what a great 80s glam band. I love these guys. I mean, they get shit on all the time. But you talk about this album, even an album like Native Tongue, which I'm not sure when that came out, maybe 90 or 91. But that's a pretty heavy album from those guys. But you got Look What the Cat Dragged In. You got and I can't even remember what the other one, Flesh and Blood, and then the one with the uncensored cover with the tongue. I can't even remember. But anyhow, they had some great stuff, and Poison was definitely a staple of the 80s. Moving right along, this is another thing that kind of I actually used to carry this one in my backpack, the cassette, of course. So I had this one with me. Twisted Sisters, Come Out and Play. I know those two for a fact, that I used to be able to listen to my Walkman in study hall in 7th grade. And in 7th grade, this and Twisted Sisters, Come Out and Play. Those two records, well, records, they were cassettes at the time, but those two albums definitely were played more than anything. But songs with like You Give Love a Bad Name, Living on a Prayer, Wanted Dead or Alive, Raise Your Hands, I'd Die for You, Never Say Goodbye, Wild in the Streets. This is a phenomenal album. And Bon Jovi, I think Brett, the Vinyl Victim, the guy that I'm doing this video response to, is a huge Bon Jovi fan. So he'll like that I included that one in there. Then moving right along, we're talking about hair bands and things like that. Now we're getting into just straight ahead, punch you in the freaking gut rock and roll. These guys brought rock and roll back to where it should be. Back to where it hadn't been in a long time. But Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. This, to me, not just an essential album of the 80s, but an essential album of any time period. This is my original copy it's still in the shrink. It has been opened, but still has the shrink on it. Just what a great album. I mean, Welcome to the Jungle, It's So Easy, Night Train, which is probably my favorite tune on the record, Out to Get Me, Mr. Brownstone, Paradise City, My Michelle, Sweet Child of Mine, You're Crazy, Rocket Queen. I know Andy has a story or 10 about how these guys suck, but don't listen to Andy. It's a common known fact that he has a taste for shit. So no, I'm just messing with you, Andy. Andy and I go back and forth. We love each other, but we love to give each other shit. But Andy, he disses all over Guns N' Roses and Sammy Hagar, and it burns my ass to no end. Then after Guns N' Roses, I hadn't really been into heavy metal. I mean, I guess to me, as a youngster, heavy metal was AC/DC or Quiet Riot, Twisted Sister, Judas Priest, even Kiss. But in 1987, I was I just became a teenager, and I think it was 87. It is 1988, so I was 14, and I got into these guys late. I wasn't exposed to Metallica until this album. When I saw the One video on MTV. And so from there I went back. I obviously picked up this record and was just floored. And I think that's probably a lot of the reason why this record is still my favorite Metallica record. Because it was my first exposure to the band. But from here I went back and picked up Master of Puppets, which is an unbelievable record. And then Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All and so on and so forth. But Black, from the opening song Blackened to the last song Dyer's Eve, this album front to back is just killer all the way through. This is like I said, this was my real first exposure to metal in the 80s. I mean, I may have heard some Iron Maiden riding around in a buddy's car or over at a buddy's house, but never to the point of I've got to have that. And so once I heard that, that's when I got hooked on and went on Metallica, and then Megadeth and Maiden, and started getting everything else. And then I started watching, Headbangers Ball and being exposed to so many other great metal bands. So going from metal to a band that it gets a lot of love, but an album that gets a lot of shit in the VC is Def Leppard, Hysteria. You guys can say all you want about this record being bubblegum and trash and bullshit, but it is just that. It's bullshit. This album is killer and was the 1980s, the late 80s especially. I mean, from the hair to the ripped up blue jeans. Man, I'm telling you, if you were tagging girls in the late 80s, you had to have this cassette playing in the car. This was it. This was hot. It's still hot. And then the last one here, NWA, straight out of Compton. Like I said, I was kind of introduced to rap and hip hop through artists like Run DMC and the Beastie Boys. But then when I heard the real stuff, the hardcore stuff, that kind of blew my mind. So straight out of Compton, Fuck the Police, Express Yourself, Dope Man, just killer stuff. Like I said, this and Eazy-E's first album, those do it for me. So some of the Ice Cube stuff, of course, that's 1990, 91, but we're talking 80s, essential 80s. Great stuff right there. Guys, I know it's been a long video, but I hope you guys hung in there till the end. I'd love to see your guys' response video to this. Brett, it was such a great idea. I'm sure it's probably been done several different times in several different ways throughout the years, but I was glad to kind of throw my hat in there and put my spin on it. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'd love to see your guys' response. I'm actually going to be working on a essential 80s country albums, so stay tuned for that. It'll probably drop tomorrow. But until then, guys, thanks for tuning in. As always, take care. Peace.